welcome everybody. I'm Donna Burr. For those who I don't know and haven't met, a partner in our Melbourne Interim Executive practice, and joined by our Interim Executive team today, Jacinta, Caroline, Lisa, Suzanne, Alison and Madeline. I'd like to welcome you all and also acknowledge the traditional custodians of the various lands on which we work today and the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people participating in today's webinar. As always, we are delighted to bring to you our webinar discussions on topics pertinent to you in your executive roles. This is the third for our year. Today's discussion is on the power of your personal brand, and this is a conversation near and dear to me and one we have with each of you over the journey of our relationship with you, and fondly, as we would call them, your superpowers. So today we will explore how you craft your brand or superpowers deeply seated in your value set and tap into that question of how you remain relevant through your professional career. I'm thrilled to present today's speaker, Garry Browne, who is the author of Brand New, Brand You, and has over 40 years experience in the consumer packaged goods industry, having been the CEO of Stuart Alexander. He now divides his time between roles in the corporate government and not-for-profit space as a non-executive director and chairman, together with mentoring and philanthropic projects. He currently chairs various boards, is passionate about giving back to the community, and has been a Rotarian for over 25 years. Garry has launched his book, Brand New, Brand You, which focuses on personal branding and the importance of reputation and relevance throughout your life. You will have read his bio for further details on his credentials and significant accomplishments. Garry, a warm welcome to the conversation today.
Thank you, Donna.
Briefly, some housekeeping, which I will share. Please use the chat, share your learnings and experiences, and take the opportunity to connect on today's webinar. When using your chat, turn your settings to all attendees and panelists, so all participants can see and bounce off one another. If you have specific questions, please use the raise hand function and log your questions there. I'll monitor the themes and questions and bring these to the conversation at the end of Garry's presentation. Will allow him to sort of have a clear run on that. This session, like all, will be recorded, and today's slides and recorded podcasts will be made available to you following the session via LinkedIn and also on our website. We'll run for an hour and we'll cut to questions in the chat room and on the raise hand function towards the end that I've said. And finally, we know today's topic is one front and centre for all interim executives and those in the executive job market. How do you craft a brand and get your superpowers out there with that end goal of the right opportunities filtering back to you and a sustainable pipeline of work in a way that doesn't feel icky and is true to who you are? We hope you find some of the answers to this in today's discussion, and that it's thought-provoking and informative with many gold nuggets to help you succeed in crafting your brand. We've got lots to get through, and without further delay, I'd love to hand over to Garry.
Thank you again, Donna. And can I also acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we all will be standing, and recognise and pay respects to elders past, present and emerging. Well, thank you very much for the opportunity to really share some of my experience, but my thoughts and ideas in terms of the power in building your own personal brand. I think I'd like to just start and give you some background as to how I actually landed on developing a personal brand. Having had 40 years of experience in consumer brands, which was very much and still is a passion of mine, brands to me are what we live and grow through in life. And having been involved in building some of the most iconic global brands in my career, whether it be brands like Chubba Chub or Tabasco or Mentos, those brands are really have started from nothing. And what I also saw in building those brands, I saw many people in years gone by who really had built not a brand, but had used their own identity being associated with the job they had. So when they left their role or the company they were with, all of a sudden they had no brand. And so I started looking at how your personal brand is aligned very much, and the concepts of building it are very much aligned with building, whether it be consumer brands or industry brands, is very similar. And so what I'd like to take you through today is the journey that I went through. If I talk about the brands, people, everyone is a brand. Those three people up on the screen there are, I would hope for all of you, well-known and iconic brands. The most recent being Ash Barty, who really probably was and still is known as a tennis star, but her brand is much bigger than playing tennis. Alan Bond in the 80s was certainly known for the corporate raiding that took place in his life and at that stage of our development in Australia. And then you've got Steve Smith, and they've all got their own brand, their own personal brand, whether it be good or bad. The question is, do they manage their own personal brand? Do they manage the relevance and impact they have in the marketplace or in the space in which they play? I'm sorry, my screen is. So in the commercial space, when we're talking about brands, we also associate ourselves with the products we buy. And if you go out to buy an iPhone, it says something about the person you are. If you go out, or the clothes you wear, or the shoes or the car you drive, or the shoes you wear, all of that is very much associated with a brand and how you associate with accordingly. And they say that, very simply, a brand is what other people say about you when you're not in the room. And again, let me spend a few moments. The three personalities up on the screen there. Kyrgios, a well-known tennis player. Is his brand good or bad or questionable? Will Smith, I suspect you had an opinion and a view of his brand probably a year ago as opposed to what it is today. And so you then find that these brands, whether they are well-known or otherwise, are going to be important to not only themselves, but it's how they control them. But why does managing your brand matter today? The most important thing is that you stand out from the crowd. You need to be unique. You can't expect that if you're in the space and industry that you have been in for quite some time, to expect to get another gig tomorrow. You have to show the impact that you will deliver. You have to show the uniqueness that you have over other potential candidates in such a way that people are going to buy. I used the analogy the other day that if you were a tomato sauce in the marketplace, there are many brands of tomato sauce. And tomato sauce is used for sausages at a barbecue. Barbecues occur every day. People go out to a supermarket shelf and go and buy tomato sauce to put and use at the barbecue. So occasionally, if you're the tomato sauce, you might get purchased off the shelf to be used at the barbecue or for your next roll. But it doesn't say that you're unique in any way. It just so happens that someone picked the lowest priced product off the shelf and use it. But you don't want to be that way. You want to be able to deliver value. You want to be remunerated and recognised for the value you are, or that you have, or that you deliver. And so it's critically important that people know for what you stand and the brand for which you are, that they are prepared to pay accordingly, and that they are going to select you because you have some unique properties and unique value to deliver. And so that leads me to the next point of what is your reputation. And Warren Buffett puts it beautifully when he says you can afford to lose money, even a lot of money, but we can't afford to lose reputation, even a shred of reputation. And that is what, to me, is core in terms of being able to maintain your relevance, because your reputation is what people know you for. And when we talk about reputation, we're also talking about values. We're talking about what you stand for. You need to really think about what you actually stand for and what are the values that people know you for, and what are the decisions you're going to make that are going to be influenced by the values that you have. What are you going to walk past and walk away from? Because I can assure you, there are times that you have or that you will have where your values will determine the decision you make and the actions you take. And I can think of plenty of times when I've had to walk away from organisations and from opportunities because of the values that the other parties have, or that have been presented to me, that will not allow me to continue to do business with those parties. That's incredibly tough at times. But I can assure you, it allows me to sleep well at night. And it allows me to preserve my reputation, because at the end of the day, values outlast the test of time. So you need to be clear as to what you will compromise on and what you will be able to determine when you are confronted with a situation that is going to be compromising your values, because that is going to be key to maintaining your reputation. Part of reputation, once we move from reputation, we move to relevance. We have to continue to think, we move to relevance. So Melanie Perkins, as I put up there, is the CEO of Canva, an amazing organisation that probably 10 years ago wasn't around. But they have been able to build an organisation, and she has been able to maintain her relevance by continually evolving and reinventing herself. And each and every one of you on the call today has to think about the fact that relevance is only a moment in time. It does not continue. You have to control and ensure that you maintain your relevance over time. Because today you might be relevant with the audience you have. Tomorrow, that audience changes and you can become totally irrelevant. Of course, relevance is also dependent on the circles in life in which you keep, whether it be your family, your business, your community, or the country you live. And so it's critically important that you are actually clear as to how you manage your journey and how you reinvent yourself. One good way, and I'm sure I would think that you're all seasoned executives, that you probably checked out what you look like on Google. When you've had the chance to look at yourself on Google, you might be pleasantly surprised. But by the same token, you may not, because it's something that you're continually updating and continually reviewing. The other thing is personal development. I think that we all need to continue to think about how we can continue to develop, to build some better critical thinking, to improve our problem solving, to improve our communication. I think communication is probably one of the big challenges, because when we're all dealing with different generations, there is no doubt that different groups of people and different generations, different demographics, all continue to communicate differently. And so it's a continual journey. And so the core capabilities and skills that I'd like you to think about when you're talking about trying to maintain your relevance and reinvent yourself are adaptability and flexibility, absolutely critical. The ability to market yourself or your ideas, the experience and industry knowledge. Continue to keep yourself updated. Continue to do research and reading to ensure you are well versed in current day thinking on industry and knowledge. As I've said, communication skills, not only written and verbal, but visual, absolutely. And teamwork and collaboration, again, very, very important. And I guess in each and every one of your situations, your team skills need to be honed, because you're working in different groups and different teams from time to time. And so you need to understand the dynamics that occur. And so I would encourage you to continue to think about adopting these type of thoughts and ways of working. It's certainly something I'm always thinking about and always pushing myself to try and work to be relevant on a regular basis. If there's one fear I have in life, it's about becoming irrelevant. Because when you become irrelevant, you start to digress and regress in life, and you stop learning, and that's the beginning of the end. And so I work very hard at trying to maintain my relevance with my friends, my family, my business contacts, and my community.
Garry, if I can just add to what you've said there, we've just hot off the press, our interim survey results for 2022 are in, and again, you know, it's like you've read our results out. It's relevance is a key theme for the interim exec population, and really we had over 500 execs respond to the survey this year, and talking about all the things that you've said around that continual development, the communications, and I think amplified in today's world of hybrid environment and working, so how people you know, can communicate that relevance and connect with those communities and stakeholder groups, teams, employers in a hybrid way, in a virtual way, digital presence, all of those forums, which, you know, even sort of 5 years ago perhaps weren't as pertinent as what they are, you know, today in the pandemic years. And maybe we'll pick this up towards the end, your thoughts around kind of that digital profile and relevance in our digital world today.
Thanks, Donna. The next point I'd like to raise with you is your credibility. Credibility does matter. It's incredibly important. And I suspect that everyone on this call today has got an immense amount of experience and knowledge and expertise, which all helps to build your credibility. But it's not the only thing. But it is certainly critical to ensure that you express yourself in a way that you demonstrate credibility. And I like to say, or like to talk about the fact that there is nothing wrong with telling people what your expertise and your experience is. A lot of us feel uncomfortable about promoting ourselves and about telling people what we're good at and what we're not good at performing. And I think it comes down to the way you deliver your message. Some people are introverted and concerned that maybe they come across as being arrogant. But let me put it to you another way. It is about being assertive, not arrogant. And the difference is by the way you deliver the message. And so it's important to be assertive to express your capability, your credibility, and your expertise. You just need to recognise and understand there's an incredibly fine line between assertiveness and arrogance. And that comes back to how you build your personal brand, which I will talk about in a little bit more detail. So let's go to visibility, because visibility is not just about having a great screenshot on a Zoom call. Visibility is very much about how you actually promote yourself, your brand. And as Donna was saying earlier about in such a digital media sense, how do we actually articulate and present ourselves? And I think, without making any assumptions, I think that Watermark probably gives you some guidance in terms of how you actually present yourself in a digital way to the outside world. But it also has to be your touch. You have to put your brand on, and you have to articulate your messaging and the way in which you want to be seen and the way in which you want to control not only your reputation, but your relevance and your personal brand. And whether it be LinkedIn, which is probably one of the mainstreams, and it doesn't mean you have to be a social media fiend by any stretch. I am far from it. I've never really been a big LinkedIn or Facebook user, let alone having a website. And in fact, to give you one situation, when I first wrote the book, I thought it was great. I was going to go out and sell the book. And then they said, well, actually, to sell the book, we've actually got to have you promote yourself. And I said, really? I said, but the book is why I wrote. No. They want to hear from the author. And so I actually had to dig in to myself and say, okay, I'm going to have to talk about, and I'm going to have to display my expertise, my personal brand, and do it on LinkedIn and some other areas that, such as Facebook, to really promote myself, but do it in an assertive way, not an arrogant way, that will help the book and some of the other areas I was involved in. That can be very tough, and it takes practice to actually work down that path. But when you get into that path, then you start feeling a lot more comfortable and a lot more confident that you can actually take the journey to where you need to be in terms of articulating your personal brand. And so social media is important. And as I said earlier, looking or Googling yourself will give you a really good understanding of how you are positioned and presented to the outside world. And some of it is probably what you might not like. But then there's the opportunity to actually take control and ownership of your own personal brand. That's visibility. The other important area to consider is networks. Today you have a fabulous network. in that Watermark has brought all of you together, and you have a community within a community to be able to connect with each other. And that's critically important in terms of building meaningful professional relationships. Not only from the point of view of being able to seek people's guidance and advice, but it's also leveraging it to be able to help others and others help you, because there's a strong reciprocity in any community. And this building networks could actually be described as building communities, because it is where everyone's in it together to try and build a much bigger community that's going to deliver better outcomes, not just for the community, but for the individuals as well. I've used the analogy that, it's the old saying of it's not what you know, it's who you know. That's critically important as well. But you've got to have the knowledge, the expertise, and the experience to understand the difference. And connections are going to be critically important to help you build not only your reputation, but also your relevance.
Again, Garry, if I just add into there, our survey data would say that the number one sort of channel, if you like, which people are, finding work and so forth, is through their connections. So we would always say the health of your network, your relationship. I love the reframe of the building a community. I feel like that's some really nice language around sort of what you're doing there, but how the more time you put into that community, the more that community will pay back to you to support in those opportunities.
Absolutely, Donna. And in fact, one of the other things that I share with you is that a long-standing friend of mine had the saying that elephants marry elephants, meaning that business people feel more comfortable dealing with other business people.
Mm-hmm.
But I tend to look at it in a different way, that elephants live in herds, and herds look after every member of the herd, young and old. And specific members of the herd take on different roles that work for them. And so that leads me to my next slide, which is very much about mentoring. Mentoring is a passion of mine for a whole host of reasons. And when I'm talking to young people, I talk to them on the basis that they should seek out a mentor, because it will help them with their journey going into the future. But I also encourage older people who are in the workforce to actually seek out a mentor, because there is no way you know everything in the marketplace. There is no way you know everything. You can always learn. But what it also does, there is a reciprocity for the mentoree and for the mentor. And that is that the mentor is able to enhance their relevance, and it will build some of their understanding of what the generation below them is actually thinking, how they're speaking, how they're interacting with their networks. Because the networks that we talk of, that people don't understand, is there are hard and soft networks. And the younger generation grow up and get older, and they can certainly enhance that network that we were talking about earlier. So I'm very keen on and encourage people where possible to try and do mentoring, whether it be as a mentoree or as a mentor. I then, in my book, which was mentioned by Donna, I came up with a model, and the model is called My Relevance Impact. And what I was trying to articulate here, and I think it probably comes across simply here, in reality, you probably will see it and feel it when it happens. And that is that our behaviours are our actions. They should match our values. So when you have someone who says they have high values, but their behaviours don't match their values, there is a high degree of mistrust. A high degree of mistrust because the perceptible reality is that others see you differently. You may say one thing, but you do another. And we've all heard that before. And then you have those who have a perception of you that is quite different to the perception you have of yourself. And so when you have that intersection of perceptible reality, behaviours and values, and they intersect in the centre, you actually have someone who's trusted, who is relevant and authentic. And people will follow you and take what you say in a way that allows you to become a strong leader who can deliver impact. That, in essence, what that chart says. And I've seen it so many times, so often, that and tested it out with a number of well-known personalities. And I'll give you one to start with, Roger Federer. Roger Federer is consistent. He's brilliant on the court and performs. His behaviours are consistent. His values are aligned. The brands he chooses to associate with are all in line. They all are they're reputable, they're high reputation, they're relevant, and they're all trusted. That is the brands he aligns with, and that is the brand he is. That's what he stands for. But then I'll put to you Nick Kyrgios, who I mentioned earlier in the presentation. He's inconsistent. He may have good behaviour at times, but then you might question his values on certain occasions, both on and off the court. And so his perception, again, by others, is inconsistent. And so if I'm in summary to try and give you a thumbnail sketch of where we've come to, and the 5 takeaways I'd like you to think about. Positioning yourself, promoting yourself in a way that is assertive, not arrogant. That's all about the way in which you deliver the message. Are you relevant? It's about reinventing yourself. And reinventing yourself doesn't mean you have to turn into somebody totally different. What it means is you have to be cognizant and vigilant of the changing environment in which you are playing. It is changing, and you need to think about how you maintain your relevance. I talk about an elevator pitch, and I'm sure each and every one of you have heard that term before, but it's a tagline for your brand. And what is the value add? What is the impact that you deliver to those who you are trying to, the audience in which you're trying to promote yourself? That's critically important. And it won't happen overnight. You need to think it through and work out what that tagline is. Networking, engaging with the outside world and testing your position. By talking with your network and being able to bounce ideas off, that will give you a good barometer and gauge as to how you take it to those who are going to be far more important in terms of they only want to hear it once. You can't test your positioning. You can't test your value add to a potential client. You need to have already gone through that pilot process. And you need to capture the learnings in a non-threatening environment from your network. And the last point is mentoring. You're never too old to be mentored, and you should never be too proud to ask someone for that support and that guidance. I today have that. I can name certainly a couple of mentors in my life today. And probably over my lifetime, I've had probably 30 to 40 mentors who have really helped me change the way I look at the world, change the way in which my journey has taken me to where I am today. So don't underestimate the power of such a mentor. And so that concludes my presentation. I want to thank each and every one of you for hanging in there and listening to me. And I hope there's been some value in terms of what we've spoken about today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Garry. I look so much in everything you've said, which we'll go through and unpack. I encourage you all to raise any questions that come top of mind. If you could do that under the raise your hand function, that will enable me to directly pull those up. But Garry, I'll start with a question from Jackie, just off the back of what you were discussing then around mentoring. And Jackie's, question was, any tips in your experience on identifying a good mentor? What would you say to that?
So my tip is, who do you aspire to be? Who do you admire, and who do you aspire to be like? And if you can identify someone who really is going to give you, in your belief, value, then why not reach out to them and ask them, can they advise you of a suitable mentor for your career development, if it is career development you're after? There are two options or two responses you'll get from that. One is they'll say, yes, I can recommend you to somebody. Or the second is they say, listen, I'm more than happy to have a coffee with you and have a chat. When you ask someone for advice, rarely will you have someone say, no, I'm not prepared. So that would be my first suggestion.
Fabulous. Good, thank you. Thank you for that. Garry, just want to jump back to the conversation around relevance, and I loved your point there. You're only relevant for kind of a moment in time, and so that's to sort of be acknowledged. Reflecting on the current sort of digital environment and presence, and certainly over the last couple of years of the pandemic, when we've all sort of flexed that muscle of engaging in a hybrid environment, in this sort of virtual environment, we still continue that on. What tips or thoughts or comments can you make around how remaining relevant has, maybe changed over this last period of time? Your views or not on the importance of a digital presence, be that on LinkedIn or otherwise, in terms of maintaining relevance? I know you sort of said your own personal experience wasn't so much being so active on LinkedIn and other forums, but just curious, there was a comment in the chat that, and as I commented, our interim executive population typically get their referrals and work through their own network first and foremost, and just wondered your reflections on how that environment is changing now that we're sort of working in a different way.
So I think there are a couple of points there, Donna. Firstly, addressing the digital side, you have to be very protective of your reputation and also your relevance in a digital environment, because of the fact that it can, depending on the forum and the channel in which you go down, can be dangerous and damning if you are not careful. And so it's important the messaging that you actually put out there is controlled to some extent.
Yep.
I think that if we try too hard to build relevance, we actually get accused of relevance deprivation, which actually then will damage your reputation, because people will see you for being somebody you're not.
Yep.
And so there is a need to actually work carefully on the messaging that you are trying to deliver, because it all comes down to the messaging. And now, doing something stupid on, and I say stupid in a digital presence, well, actually, and you may think it's going to be relevant to the younger generation, but it's not, because they'll look at it and saying, that doesn't fit you, because you actually have to ensure that when you move your branding and your relevance, it is in line not only with your audience, but it's not too far out of kilt with where they perceive you. So it's an incremental small move. It's not, incremental moves are small in terms of maintaining your relevance. They're not gigantic moves.
That makes sense.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. Yeah. Garry, another question. You sort of started the conversation around how brand, for many of us, can be associated with a role that we're doing, and that when you leave that role, we can kind of lose brand. And you spoke a bit about detaching oneself from a kind of role to sort of define their own brand. Can you talk a little bit about, how you go about that, and why, in your view, people find that really hard to do?
Okay, so why is it hard to do? I think because we haven't sat down to really think about how to separate the two out.
Mm-hmm.
The fact that we might work for an organisation, there's a certain amount of ego about working for an organisation as opposed to trying to build your own personal brand. So the organisation's brand as opposed to your own personal brand. And I think to some extent it's a fear. It's a fear we all have, I think, of trying to articulate that. And so trying to separate it out takes a strong intent to say, I'm going to do other things other than just my own, other than just be known for the job I have. I've always wanted to be known for the person I am, not the job I had.
Yep.
And the way I went about it was to actually look for other things in my life other than a job that was going to define me.
Mm-hmm.
And so I looked towards taking more community initiatives within the community, whether it be in a charitable sense or whether it be in trying to develop even playing a musical instrument or doing things that were going to be non-job related, because even running marathons or triathlons or whatever, people saw you as doing something else.
Yep.
And so, yes, the different forums and environments knew you as being that person, not necessarily just working for that company.
Love it. It really is, who are you if you're not doing that role, isn't it? A deep question to yourself, and who do you want that person to be?
Correct.
Garry, another question sort of popped up on the chat here, and this actually, it's an interesting one, and often when executives are transitioning to interim is a common one. Any thoughts on the elevator pitch when you're something of a jack of all trades? So often I find people say, well, actually, there's a lot of things I could do, a bit of everything. And we would always say, that's obviously not helpful necessarily to someone trying to buy your service when you're quite broad about, what you can do. I do welcome your comments, how you define that elevator pitch when somebody's starting from that point.
So that's the tomato sauce bottle, right?
Mm-hmm. It is. You want to be Tabasco sauce.
What you need to do is move from a bottle of tomato sauce to a bottle of Tabasco, because then you finally point to the fact that Tabasco is a hot sauce, right? So there's in a consumer branding sense, that's the gap. The issue is trying to define why or what value do I add. And putting down or going through the process, and I don't know whether you do this, Donna, encouraging your community to do a SWOT analysis of what their strengths and weaknesses are, and even to the point of what do some of the clients say about the work I do.
Yeah,
I'll give you one example. I was doing some mentoring last week for an organisation, and they do a type of speed dating networking. And I sat with this woman who is a non-exec director, and she'd been struggling to try and come with a way to articulate herself. And we talked about the elevator pitch, and she said, yeah, I do this and that. And she gave me an elevator pitch, which was probably about 7 sentences long. And I said, an elevator pitch is literally one statement, one sentence. And I said, tell me, what do the clients tell you that they like about you? Oh, she said, oh, look, they reckon I can untangle anything. And I said, what do you mean by that? Well, I can give them a very simple answer to a complex problem. And I said, well, isn't that what you do in life? Does your family tell you that? Yes, I actually am the problem solver. So we started working on that, and then we came to the conclusion that she makes complex problems easy to understand for a corporation. And all of a sudden she said, I've been trying to do this for a year, and I now have my elevator pitch. So it's as simple as that. It's as simple as being able to say, you can make something, a complex problem, easy to understand for those who don't. So those sort of words, you play around with the words, but it actually comes very clearly once you've been able to articulate it.
Yes. Yeah, look, thank you. That really resonates. We would also say to our interims, if you sort of reflect on your career, what are the sort of the problems, roles that you've always been tapped on the shoulder for? So you haven't necessarily sought them out, but people have seen it in you as being that person to do X. And as you've said, we would say, ask 3 of your trusted colleagues, advisors, people that know you and know the work that you do, what would they pick up the phone and call you for? If they had a problem or an issue, what would that be? And many of our execs who have done that have been surprised perhaps at the simplicity of what that was. So it doesn't have to be something that's, unique, complex or whatnot. It just has to be unique to you and what you do better than anyone else. Yep. There was a question on here to you, Garry, around how would you define your superpowers or your brand? If I could put you on the spot.
My tagline is that I'm the catalyst that helps realise people's potential.
I love it. And so the journey you've gone on to get to that succinct sentence?
It took a while. And I've obviously gone through the same process we've just discussed with probably more, but it became a lot more difficult because having written the book and then trying to then recognise that actually my positioning and my brand actually came after writing the book, because I actually learned so much more writing the book and realised so much. When you put pen to paper, it becomes quite a different story altogether. And so it took me probably a couple of years to get it right. I mean, the book took quite some time. So from that perspective, the journey probably took a lot longer than, say, some other people would take to get to where I did.
Great, thank you. I just, if there's any, last questions, actually, there's another one coming through now. I'll share that before I add one. The question is from Graham. How do you deal with brand overshoot, where clients might see you as overqualified for the problem they are trying to solve?
I think the point there to make when you are more experienced is to help the client understand that you've been on the journey and you understand how to get to where they are. And in fact, you've gone further, but you actually can still do the job that they are looking for because you've done that over and over again.
Yeah, love it. It's an interesting one, Graham's probably raising a point that a number of our execs may confront. There's, I guess the value proposition of an interim exec is that they overhit the mark, have the experience, the war wounds, if you will, to come in and be immediately effective. And then sometimes for our clients, when faced with that, to Graham's words, the client's feedback will be, well, you're overqualified for what I need you to do. So it's absolutely a balance. I like your words there around being on the journey, be where they've got to get to and beyond, and can help them with that. And you are happy to roll up the sleeves and do the work that needs to be done as well.
Absolutely. And the other point is that by having Graham on the job doing that, who's got more experience, it's actually going to lift the standard of the overall organisation.
Yep.
Because isn't that what they want? More skills in the organisation and a higher quality and standard.
Absolutely. You kind of lift the organisation and help
Absolutely.
take it forward.
Yep.
And all the mentoring opportunities and so forth.
Correct.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I guess one last, so many questions to go through, but one that you had talked a lot about was sort of reputation and sort of clarifying your value set, and reflected on times that you've walked away from work and or conversations because is there anything that you can share to sort of bring that to life that was perhaps kind of pivotal to you in terms of really recognizing the value set, or a bit of an aha moment
Well, yes,
that occurred? Yep.
Yeah, the aha moment was where I was negotiating a business that was a very significant size, and I talk about it in the book, about $30-odd million. And this particular organisation said that they wanted to build a sustainable business in this country. And then we started having the discussion about the ingredients in the product. And what they wanted to do was try and fool the consumer and tell them the product wasn't what it was. And I said, well, sorry, I can't go down that path. Oh, but that means we've got to relabel all the products, etc. I said, but at the end of the day, if you are not true to yourself and the quality of the product isn't what you say it is, you're going to fall flat on your face. They said, you don't know what you're talking about. I said, okay, so I'm sorry, but I think your values and that of our organisation are quite different. And so we walked away. And that business went to another organisation. Within 2 years, that business was dead, as in they'd lost all their business. And it was a serious issue, and it wasn't to do with the fact that they were caught out legally. It was because the consumer found out, and the consumer didn't meet their expectations because it was a different quality product to what they were telling them.
Yep.
And that to me was an aha moment of yes. And people were saying, you've got to be kidding. You can't walk away from that size business. Very easy. And subsequent to that, I've had a number of other instances where I've encouraged CEOs of organisations I've been on the board saying, stay away. You'll just fall flat on your face.
Yeah, good. Thank you for sharing that. I think that's I think we've all faced those moments where you sort of in a bit of a values dilemma, if you like, as to what the right decision would be. But I concur with you that kind of landing back on that compass will stand you in good stead over the long term, even if in the moment it can be, seem like a sort of insurmountable decision to make.
Yep.
Garry, we are close to top of the hour. I can't see any sort of final questions coming through other than we'll share with you the transcript because there's lots of fabulous feedback saying that this has been a really valuable and insightful topic and great presentation and insight. So we'll make sure we get that information to you. For those still on the call, following this session, we will certainly send you a link to the recorded presentation so you can go back and review that. Also a link through to Garry's website where you can purchase the book and also listen to his podcast series. There's a series of podcasts of Garry interviewing leaders from a variety of backgrounds and the sort of conversation around their brand, relevance, reputation, so forth. So I really encourage you to have a listen to those as well. Garry, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate your sort of preparation today and being involved in the discussion. Really wonderful insights. So really thank you for your time.
Pleasure. Thank you, Donna. Thank you, everyone.
And thank you, everybody. Have a great day, and we look forward to you joining us on our next webinar. Take care.